Hi, everybody. Ken Kirschbaumer with SVG. I'm here with Charlie Dunn, Telestream SVP of the Tech Video Business Unit. Charlie, thanks for joining us. How are you holding up?
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no, we're holding up well. We're making it do, and I think we see a light at the end of the tunnel from the way we've been working in the last year, and I think we're optimistic about that.
Excellent, great.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you guys have been busy. That is for sure. Even despite the pandemic, and you have a lot of product lines and a lot of cool services. So let's roll through some things here. Obviously, test and measurement and test instrumentation is an important part of live sports. So, what's your view of the current state of test instrumentation in live sports production?
Yeah, no, we were at Tektronix for a long time, and now we're at Telestream, and we're really happy to be part of Telestream. It's been a good fit for us. And I think, for us, for live sports, I'd say for our products that we make, which is waveform monitors and generators, it's probably the toughest segment. The customers are typically on the leading edge of technology. They're pretty in tune with what they want in their vehicles, and they're pretty demanding about what goes in there. The operators are really demanding about how things should work. So for us, we try to focus on that segment because we know if we can do well here, that'll translate to being good in every other segment. So for test and measurement in live sports, for us, it's been a real focus because there's been a lot going on, a lot of change in just moving from SDI to IP or transitioning to supporting more UHD events for people, and we've been right in the thick of that.
Sure. So how do you see the, obviously there's a lot of existing SDI trucks on the road and SDI facilities. And then there's this move to IP-based facilities, which are going to get more robust and more data pumping through. So, it's always a challenge, right? You're sort of like, okay, you're looking to make investments in new gear but you may be not needing it in a year or two or three. So what's your sense as far as how they should approach test and measurement equipment purchases today?
Yeah, well, I think when we looked at the transitions in the industry that were coming, we knew that in the long run, they both UHD and IP would be there, but there would be this, I would say, long transition that would happen that would be based on a lot of different factors on whether standards would be there and others. So we took the approach to, in a couple of ways. One, we knew we were going to have to support both existing standards and the new standards. And we knew we were going to have to support them in a way where we could be flexible with customers on what standards they were. So we worked on this product platform we call PRISM that we introduced probably 4 years ago with this in mind. And we've really been targeting making it easier for our customers. So whether they were trying to upgrade their 3G truck to handle a little bit of UHD, or whether they were building I would say a super scale IP truck or something like that, we would need to fit into that. And I'd say up until this moment, and we're just getting ready to announce a couple new models for PRISM that are really targeted at this, I would say, space-constrained mobile production environment. So we've essentially taken all this capability that we had, I'd say in a WFM 5200, which was a workhorse for the industry, and packed in UHD and IP and even up to 8K in that same form factor. And we're just releasing that this next week.
Excellent. So I know obviously you mentioned PRISM, and let's face it, the move to IP, a lot of it is about adding more cameras into a show and making the shows bigger, right? Even despite the pandemic, shows are not getting smaller. So how can PRISM sort of help out a broadcaster as their shows, as a production team, as their shows get bigger and they start adding more cameras into their complement?
Yeah, I think in a couple different ways. One, I think, was brought about with this COVID environment. What we found is that, as people were building out these IP trucks, it takes more than the expertise of a typical EIC. So, people say in remote locations would need to come in and help people get things set up or diagnose problems. And so with our PRISM unit, you could actually remote into those using a NOAA VNC technology. And it was I would say the companies that were providing mobile services were able to take their small set of engineers and apply them across a larger number of trucks that were on the road for these kind of things. And the other aspect of it is something that we see more in the future. So as more cameras come in, it's not always a really large camera event. In some cases, it's a more moderate sized camera, and then you need to scale up to a large camera. So you need to build the trucks with that in mind. but you don't want to necessarily overbuild the truck for the, simple case. So we've come out with a new model of PRISM, which is actually 2 full screens. And so where a waveform monitor would sit in a half rack, 3RU with a single screen, we've actually built a waveform monitor with 2 screens. So we got this idea of working with some of our partners doing mobile production that, hey, I'd really like to have a really large waveform and vector. But as we dug into that more, we found that people say, hey, I'd like to have a really large screen when I have a moderate set of cameras. But when I need to do a really large event and I need to load the cameras in, I need to put in more staff. And so we can actually split the use of that waveform monitor between 2 different shaders now. And that's, again, this is what we're introducing this week with these new products, these new PRISM models.
That's great. Obviously, weight is always an issue. So I'm assuming this would save some weight on the truck. And rack space,
the big thing is that they're 5 inches deep, because now when you look at a console, it didn't always used to be this way, but now the waveform monitor is probably the deepest thing in the console. So however deep your product is determines how much space they get. So we've taken all the technology of a PRISM and really compacted it into what we call a no compromise form factor. So it's a small form factor, 5 inches deep, a 3RU or a full rack 3RU. And it should fit into any console that someone's designing for a truck.
Excellent. So obviously, for a lot of people, the first reason why they want to call someone like Telestream would say, how can you help us? They obviously will have a problem that they're looking to solve before they call you. So when you look at the industry right now, as far as engineers and technical staff, what do you see some of the big challenges that they're facing, and then how you and your team can kind of help them address those?
Yeah, if you increase the resolution of the show you're doing, whether you're going from SD to 4K, the way you're doing that show is largely the same. But when you add in HDR and wide color gamut, then there's another dimension that some of the operators have to deal with, mostly camera shaders. And so while you want to get the real pop with HDR, what you can end up doing is overdriving your SDR and making that look bad, which is primarily going to most of your audience. So they have to be able to balance those things. And I'll just give you one example. So, there's a lot of white in a sports broadcast, whether it's the gridiron or the lines or the uniforms. And you can really easily overdrive that to, make the Dodgers and their Dodger white look like they're glowing.
Right.
And so you have to really balance that. So what we put into the scopes is an intuitive way for them to manage how they were producing for SDR and getting the oomph out of HDR that they were doing. And just the way that we do that is, just one example is, we'll do a false color on an image. So we'll say, hey, white needs to be between 100 and 200 nits. So let's color anything that's between 100 and 200 nits in a cyan color. So that way an operator can know that they're shading that correctly by just looking at the screen and seeing that all the lines are in cyan. And if it happens to be white uniforms, those are in cyan. And if they're not that way, you're probably overdriving it. So we could put like a red color, for example, in a place where they might be overdriving the whites and give them an indication of that.
Very cool. Very cool. So besides the form factor, which you mentioned, what are some of the other attributes of PRISM that are beneficial to live production?
Yeah, I think, one thing that's really valued by mobile operators is the ability to handle any event and to be able to take their capital and apply it, to many different places. And so we built a PRISM with the idea that it's essentially software scalable. So you buy the platform and you can start at 3G, you can move up to 4K, you can even go up to 8K, and this is all in a license scheme. So even though it looks and feels like a piece of hardware instrument that they've always had, it's really what we call software defined. And so that flexibility gives them, less anxiety when they're putting it into the truck, because a lot of times they don't know whether that truck's going to need to scale up to those things before they buy it, and they'd like to do that later, or they know they need to do it now, and they may even scale beyond that going forward.
Right. Excellent. So, wouldn't be a conversation in 2020 or 2021 without mentioning COVID-19. Looking back, did people use your products differently? Were you surprised by anything as far as the market in general when it comes to live sports?
Yeah, we were surprised by a couple of things. Even though there were fewer events, that they were using more trucks just because they needed to space people out inside of the trucks. That was probably one of the surprising aspects. The other one I alluded to earlier was it also became advantageous for them if they didn't need to be on site just for, distancing reasons and others, is that they could remotely connect into the box and essentially use it as if they were there. And the nice thing about PRISM is that if you're trying to check out all your IP connects and all the flows, that you can actually see the video and the rest of those things from a remote location. So people were really taking advantage of that. It was something that we had that was more, I would say, more of an internal tool that we thought might be appealing to customers, became an essential thing for customers during COVID. I'd say the other point is maybe not so much what's in the product today, but what we saw was everything that was in motion to, move towards, people handling events in an at-home manner just got accelerated. And I think those trends will continue. And just like we chatted about, we were probably going to be working from home more than we were used to, we expect to see that in live production as well. And so this platform will take us to, I would say, technologies that one day will allow, say a full gallery in a control room to be at home. And I think that's our vision. That's where we really see things going.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been fascinating to see the that acceleration. I know going back a year or so ago when I talked with our team here about covering games, the story was typically just more cameras, more of this. The shows got bigger, and that was the stories. But now, this past year, every story is different. Every show has been different. So it's been amazing to see these workflows and how people have just adjusted. It's kind of stunning, really.
Yeah. No, it's nice to see things return, back to a normal level. And, there was a real effort to get the events going again. And, I think the TV played a large role in making people feel like, things were getting back to normal, and we were happy to be part of that.
Great. Well, thanks, Charlie, for your time. Appreciate your support here at SVG. And obviously, on behalf of all of our members, thank you for all the work you guys do, and stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Good talking to you. Thank you.
You too. Thanks.